So welcome everyone. My name's John. I'm the network coordinator for the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative, or the CTNC. So many of you may have been on our webinars or open space sessions before. So thank you for joining us. And if this is your first time, you're very, very welcome. The CTNC is a peer-to-peer learning network for community tree nurseries right across the UK. And we run these webinars every few months on topics of interest to our members. Tonight's theme is plant health and biosecurity, safeguarding community tree nurseries. I know this is of big interest and big concern to pretty much anyone involved in CTNs, protecting against pests and diseases. We're very lucky this evening to have two great speakers with us. So first up will be Carolyn Williamson, who's a plant health and seeds inspector with APHA. You may be familiar with the Animal and Plant Health Agency. And Carolyn's going to talk us through basically all the aspects of plant health and what we should be looking out for, and the different regulations to be aware of. And then we will pass over to Jackie Shallcross, who works with the Tree Council. And Jackie's been working on projects with CTNs for a few years now, and is currently working on a project specifically on biosecurity. So we're going to hear all about that and how you can get involved. As I said, there will be a question and answer session at the end. So if you do have any questions throughout either of the speakers, do please pop them into the chat. I'll keep a note and we'll ask them at the end, and then you'll also have an opportunity if you think of anything at the end to put in a question then. Okay, so basically without any further ado, I will invite our first speaker. Carolyn, if you would like to share your screen and we'll get started. And yeah, looking forward to a great evening. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I think we're ready to go.
Can you see that okay?
We can indeed, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming along and listening to the talk this evening. So just to introduce myself, Carolyn Williamson. I'm one of the inland plant health inspectors, and I'm based in West Wales, and I cover Pembrokeshire and Ceredigion. Previous to working in South Wales, I was responsible for leading the team in North Wales, and mostly due to the location of my work, I became quite interested in the community tree nursery aspect of the work. And I have given this talk to Claycy Goidwig, who are also help community tree nurseries in Wales. So apologies if any of you have come from that area, because you might already have heard this. Right, I'm just struggling to see how this changes. All right, here we go. Right. Right. Oops. Oh, I see. Okay. So Animal and Plant Health Agency are an agency that do work on behalf of DEFRA. For myself, we don't get involved with the animal health team. They're mostly the vets, but we are responsible in plant health for implementing the plant health legislation in England and Wales. There are many pests and diseases which, if they become established, would damage our crops and environment, and this would impact both our economy and well-being. So the official controls and restrictions we feel are vital. And as I say, we are responsible for implementing the legislation associated with plant health. So just as a summary then, our role to protect food security and to protect the environment. So one way or another, I think that impacts us all. So I'll move swiftly on to the relevant legislation, I think. So the 2016/2031 is probably the one that you guys will come across the most, and has some impacts on what you do. And this was recently updated to emphasize that growing any plants or trees is not the main, that growing for profit is not the main factor for registration with plant health. It's any organization, whether you are involved in planting, breeding, production, moving in and out of Great Britain, making available on the market, storage, collection, dispatching, processing. This is all relevant to community tree nurseries. So anyone, I'd like to emphasize this, who is a professional operator, and as I say, they don't need to be making any profit, really needs to be registered with the Plant Health Inspectorate. And this can be done via a link on the Gov UK website, and it is free. It just means that we know you're about. It means that we can make contact with you if there are any quarantine pests and diseases that we feel you should have more information about. We will provide surveillance visits at no charge to the business or the community tree nursery. And it's just good that everybody's on the same page with this, basically. It always assumes that the community tree nurseries are just selling and providing plants to end users. Because if you are doing more than that, then you'll need to know a little bit more about the legislation in 2019, which was released as a set of legislation called the SRSF, or the Smarter Rules for Safer Food. And this introduced a whole range of pest and disease control measures. And out of that came something that you've probably heard about called plant passporting. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. So, as I've said, just to reiterate again, you should all be registered. There's no costs to that. But plant passporting is where you're a professional operator, or you can just be in control of a community tree nursery, supplying plants to retailers, or supplying certain seed to retailers, or if you're selling on the internet, any plants and certain seeds again. If you are just moving the plants face to face, you do not require a plant passport. Or if you sell them at the gate of the community tree nursery, or you just take them to the site where you're going to plant them, you don't need a plant passport, but you still need to be registered. And so, as I say, registration is free, but with plant passporting, there are two important pillars here of traceability, where you have to keep the records of the plant source for at least 3 years. And the second pillar is assurance that the plants are inspected by us and they meet the Great Britain plant health standards. And together with that, there's a standard format of the label. It always has to say UK plant passport, and it has 4 letters associated, A, B, C, D, where A is the botanical name of the plant. B is your own personal plant passporting number, which we would issue to you once you've signed up for plant passporting. C would be a traceability code. And this is something that we discuss with the clients. It has to be something that makes sense to you, but you can explain to us so that we can understand the source of the plants. And D, generally, if it's a UK plant, it's GB at the bottom, because Northern Ireland aren't included in this system at the moment because of the complications with the EU. And any plant passport is attached to any plants or trees that are being moved. But they have to be attached to the smallest saleable unit. So if you're just selling one plant pot, that's what it's attached to. If you have a tray of plants, you attach it to the tray. If you have a trolley, you attach it to the trolley. If you have a pallet of trees, you attach it to the pallets. Okay. So this is where the first charges come in and people get a bit confused. Again, I'm going to say registration is free and I would really urge you all to be registered. But if you do want a plant passport, there are charges. And at the moment, these are £61.58 for each 15 minutes on site or part of. And we can only charge you a minimum fee of half an hour to carry out a growing season inspection. Again, it isn't for all trees and plants. There's a certain host range of more trees that are at risk from quarantine pests and diseases. But we would always do a general surveillance anyway, even we didn't have to do a specific growing season inspection for your trees and plants. And the second thing we do is an annual records assessment, where we look at the traceability of the plants that you're selling. And these records need to be kept for 3 years. For small businesses, particularly like the community tree nurseries, I try and combine these two inspections into 130 minutes to keep the costs as low as possible, and especially if there's no host plants with quarantine pests and diseases. I have to say that in the next year or so, there's meant to be a 20% rise on these charges. So be aware that, that these are likely to go up in the next year or so. And there's also a fee of £20.66 for a paper application to Plant Passport. But if you're fairly savvy on the computer, there's no charge to apply online. And our plant health system for doing this is called eDomero, which some of you may have heard of. Okay. So we try and work with you guys. It's in everybody's interests, really, to know what's going on out there in around Britain, and see what pests and diseases are causing the most problems. So, as I say, we will come to all registered nurseries to conduct routine surveillance of plants and trees which are being grown at the nursery, and we'll discuss with you the current biosecurity issues and the quarantine pests and diseases. And secondly, we can also take samples of any diseased or infested trees or plants to send for diagnosis. We use the Farrer laboratories in York, and we can do this at no cost to yourself. Primarily, we're here looking for things that are not that common in the UK, but we're quite willing to take a sample of something we're not quite sure what it is, to help you identify it and protect yourselves from what is causing a problem on the nursery. So I thought I would just run through. So there are a lot of current pest and disease threats. So I'm only going to discuss just a few of them here. If you're interested, I can send out a link to the Plant Health portal, which discusses a lot more about the quarantine pests and diseases we're on the lookout for. But I thought I'd just pick out a few key ones that might affect trees, and just to enlighten you a little bit what the sort of things are that we're looking for. So most of you have probably heard of the oak processionary moth. So this one is actually already present in the UK, mostly around the London area, but it's slowly moving out. However, the movement of trees from that are highly restricted. So if you're outside this zone, you're allowed to move oaks. If you're in this zone, then you definitely are not allowed to move oaks, particularly over an 8 centimetre girth. So oak processionary moth came in from Central and Southern Europe. It has a human health threat because the hairs are barbed and it can cause quite nasty rashes. And obviously it has a a huge effect on the oaks, defoliating them, weakening the tree, leaving them vulnerable to other threats. So the overarching policy with oak processionary moth is to slow its spread and to reduce the levels of the pests and to protect the oak resource. Right, I was just going to mention as well, we also, which is not in the country, there's a pine processionary moth. So pine processionary moth is also in mainland Europe. And during a sort of a plant health visit to the Vale of Glamorgan show, I was quite shocked by a lady who came to speak to us there, who said that she'd recently been on holiday in Spain, sitting underneath a pine tree with these caterpillars falling off the pine onto her head, and again, in a similar way, causing a rash and defoliating the pine trees. So they're not far away. We do look at imports regularly for pine pests, so it's just one to be aware of, but it's not here yet. Another one that we routinely look for on imports is the citrus longhorn beetle, and there's a relative of it called the Asian longhorn beetle. They're pretty big if you see them in real life, 2 to 3 centimeters long with these very long antennae. They have a large host range: citrus, apple, aces, poplars. We particularly look for them in imported aces, Acer palmatums, and we're always looking for these large holes where the, all right, if I show you here, the larvae can spend 1 to 2 years inside the tree feeding on the pith, and there's little or no external sign of its presence. But eventually the adult's going to come out, and they make these big boreholes in the base of the aces. And this is what we look out for, along with some frass. So I think these have managed to get into the UK on a few occasions. So 2002 from Italy, acer tree was found with some exit holes, which was fortunately found and dealt with. I think a more serious one around about the same time in Kent came in pallet wood, and escaped into the local woodland, and it took plant health. I think they eradicated the main infestation fairly quickly, but they had to return for 5 or 6 years to make sure that there'd been no more eggs laid and that the area was pest free. So when plant health become aware of a problem like this, there's a lot of resource goes in trying to eradicate it. So just to let you know. So yeah, here's some of the things that went on to eradicate longhorn beetle: destruction of a huge amount of trees, area surveys, quarantines around. They used acoustic detection. So should be unlucky to get anything like that in your area, you would find the place is very busy with plant health indeed. So this is just an overview now of some of the bacterial diseases we're on the lookout for. The central one actually, fire blight, Erwinia, caused by Erwinia amylovora. This is not what we call a quarantine disease. This is what we call a regulated non-quarantine disease, because this one's out there in the wider environment. But if we find it on a nursery, we don't issue a notice of destruction. We just ask for voluntary destruction to try and keep the level of this in the wider environment as low as possible. So we still look for it when we come on inspections, but we treat it in a slightly different way. The other ones I'm going to just have a talk about are Xanthomonas arboricola PV prunei, which affects prunus trees. And we see this quite regularly on imports. But again, we seem to be keeping it at a low level. We did a survey last year to see if we could find it in the wider environment, and we couldn't. So obviously the measures we're taking with the imports are working. And then I also just want to touch base with this one on the right, Xylella fastidiosa, a bacterial leaf scorch, which is, if this enters the country, it's got such a massive host range. There will be huge ramifications, and you would definitely hear about this one on the news. So we'll just have a quick look at these. Here's some general symptoms. Bacterial. You often get dieback with bacterial diseases. You might, in extreme cases, see some bacterial ooze on the stem. They're often associated with leaf spots. So let's have a quick look at this bacterial leaf scorch. This Xylella fastidiosa is responsible for taking out, I think, thousands of acres of olive groves. I think particularly Portugal and Greece have been affected, and I know it's present in Italy and probably in a slightly lower level in Spain as well. So as it says there, there's about 150 genera which could be affected. So this includes oak, citrus, elm, prunus, anything that you think of as a Mediterranean plant, it's pretty much would affect it. And it's devastating. As the name suggests, Xylella, it affects the xylem of the stem, which would cause the dieback and general death of the plant in the end. It's spread by a leafhopper feeding on the xylem. If it takes in infected cells and then goes on to another plant or tree, it will introduce the infection into the next plant. So along with controlling the disease, you also have to control the vector. There was quite a spurious report a few years ago in the UK saying that the leafhoppers that cause cuckoo spit were spreading the Xylella in the UK, which was completely wrong. They may, if we do get Xylella, which I really hope we don't in the UK, they may become part of the vector, but at the moment it doesn't exist in the UK. So anything that you see with cuckoo spit is not transferring anything serious at the moment. There's just a few more pictures. Yeah, general dieback, pretty devastating. And if the bad news is, if there was a nursery that unfortunately did take any of these trees in and it was found on their site, it will be shut down completely, and there would be something like a 5-kilometre area around it, which would become surveyed and shut down for plant selling at all. So please, the less olives that people import, the better, and much better to have UK provenance. Right, just a few more there. Right, so another one that I mentioned we do see quite regularly is this Xanthmonas arboricola prunei. Typically, we see this as a necrotic spot either on the leaf or on the fruit, and it has this sort of yellow halo around the spot, and it could reduce the yield, if that's what you're interested in, with the cherries or what have you, quite significantly. But what we most often see it on is on imported laurels. Usually it's fairly easy to spot, so we've destroyed huge batches of this. That's quite a regular one for us. However, as you can see on the screen, on the right-hand side, there's a load of laurels there, which are also infected, but this isn't with Xanthmonas, this is with a Pseudomonas. So we never assume what we're looking at is what we think it might be. We would always send a sample off for diagnosis at the labs before any action is taken. But just to reiterate, if we found anything like this on a nursery, we would issue a notice of destruction, and there is no compensation. It's the responsibility of the person perhaps importing or growing to get rid of the diseased plants by incineration or deep burial. Right, so moving on, I've just picked out a few fungal diseases that you're probably familiar with and are affecting trees. So we've got sweet chestnut blight, which we're on the lookout for. The phytophoras, again, are pretty much in the country, but most of them haven't been deregulated yet. So they're still called quarantine, but I suspect some point in the future they will become regulated non-quarantine, and we would ask for voluntary destruction. So we've got Phytophora lateralis on Lawson cypress and Canovii. We see that quite a lot in the wider environment. But I'm sure the one that most of you are familiar with is Phytophora amorum, or sudden oak death, which has pretty much taken out all the larch in the country now. It has quite a large host range as well. But from my experience, it doesn't take out rhododendrons fast enough. It just seems to partially infect them. And they are a source of spores which can then go on to infect other, well, as I say, the larch pretty much gone, but they're a source of disease for other plants around them. It came in 2002 from America, where it was affecting the oaks there, which was why it became known as sudden oak death or sod. But they have discovered that the British oaks seem to have a different genetic sort of makeup, and it doesn't infect them at the rate it was infecting the American oaks. This doesn't mean that there might be some, changes to the genetics in the future, and that they may start on our oaks infecting them. So it's something we're always on the lookout for. But at the moment, as I say, it's more seen on the rhododendrons, the camellias, viburnums, pyrrhus, and sometimes beech. But yeah, we are always on the lookout for it, and it is, I see a lot of it in Wales where it's warm and very damp. So symptoms, typically wilting, brown leaf spots, tip dieback, blackened stems, bleeding cankers, leaf necrosis. You can always give us a call if you don't know what you're seeing. Just please get in touch with us. We're always happy to come and visit and sample and let you know, if your suspicions are what you think the disease is or not. Virus, there are a huge number of virus diseases as well, but actually a lot of them seem to be more on produce than on trees. However, having said that, there is the elms, yellows, Phytophora. So if elms manage to survive past Dutch elm disease, they could get hit by phytoplasma. I don't see many elms, and I don't see many phytoplasma, but that's, I'd very much like to see elms coming back. The other serious one is the plum pox on the prunus. So I'm just going to have a little talk about that. So this is a very serious virus disease of many wild and cultivated species of prunus, so the ones producing fruit and otherwise. So there isn't really a cure. So it is really just trying to reduce, if you see the plants infected, to take the plants away and destroy them, or if the vectors of the viruses, which could be aphids or other small insects, they need to be kept under control as well. And there are, in addition to the plant health legislation on this, there is fruit marketing legislation. So if you are not allowed to sell any diseased trees to people who are actively going to be using the trees for fruit on a commercial basis. So that's also something else to be aware of. Just a little bit more information about viruses there. They usually come with all sorts of mosaics and ring spots and vein clearing. So again, if you had any suspicions of that on your trees, please give us a shout. All of these we would send to the lab. We can't diagnose these on site. Okay. Right, so I was going to move on and just talk a little bit about biosecurity. It sounded like Jackie was going to do quite a lot as well, so I won't linger on it too long. So, on your community tree nurseries, I would emphasise that you practice good hygiene controls, cleaning and disinfecting your tools regularly, your equipment, your footwear, your growing containers. We actually use a 70% alcohol when we're out on site, and I think this, which is called Claricide, I think this is available online if you're interested in getting some. Really important to keep your tools clean between different batches of trees and things like that. Cleaning greenhouses, water butts, keeping an eye on the health of your plants. If you do introduce new plants onto your nursery site, have a quarantine area where you can put the plants just to keep an eye on them for a few months, 6 months, until you're sure that they're free from any pests or diseases. I would encourage biodiversity on your site. I think monoculture is the worst thing ever. If you're growing batches of trees, and I don't know what you guys all grow, but say you had Crataegus and you had Prunus and maybe you had Malus, mix them up a bit, put your batches in different areas, keep your batches together, but don't put all your batches of Prunus together. Have one Prunus, then have a bit of Crataegus, and then, I don't know, if you're doing beech, have Fagus, and then put your next Prunus a few rows away. Don't put them all together. What else? So, okay, I think I'm talking to the people who are doing the sensible thing here, where you're sourcing UK material. Just be very careful. You can see people on these photos using disinfectant mats. If you want to be really careful when people are coming on site, these are the sort of things you can introduce. And just cleaning boots there again. If you've been somewhere else, come back to your own site, I would recommend cleaning your boots. So how do you dispose of your waste? You might have a compost heap, but don't put anything in your compost heap that is symptomatic of any pests or diseases. I had a horror story of a guy telling me recently that he had been working with a team who'd taken down some dead ash trees and then chipped the ash and put them round as a sort of a weed deterrent. Bad idea. If you've cut down a diseased ash, please just burn it. Don't use the chippings for anything else. That the ash, although it is dead, there will still be the possibility of it producing more disease spores, which could go on to infect other things. We always recommend destruction by burning. That's the easiest way. But if you're in a location where burning is restricted, then we ask for deep burial at a accredited council site. Okay. Right, so then I'm going to the end now. Just wanted to talk briefly about some of the other schemes that we're sometimes confused with or you might not be aware of. I think most of you probably will be aware of this one because of what you do. But if you are collecting your own seeds or cuttings, you might need to be registered with FRM, the Forest Reproductive Materials. This can be voluntary or it can be required, depending on whether you're going to supply for the forestry industry. So there's some links that you can follow to find out more about that. And forestry purposes, I have read, is defined as a woodland planting of 0.25 hectares or more, 15 meters width and 20% canopy. So it just gives you some idea what FRM's looking for. That's not a particularly big area. So I think it would apply to a lot of you if you are collecting your own seeds. And it's planting for any purpose, including amenity, conservation or enhancement. And you would get different inspections from the FRM inspectors as well. I also wanted to mention plant healthy. This is the one that plant health gets confused with the most. So listen up. Plant healthy is voluntary. Community tree nurseries may wish to join it, but this is entirely separate and is not to be confused with animal and plant health and plant passporting. Plant healthy is very expensive. I understand it costs thousands and they do very rigorous inspections. I think we do slightly less rigorous, but I think we can point you in the right direction just with plant health and plant passporting. And as I say, we are free for registration with relatively low costs for plant passporting. Plant health is very expensive. So I'm pleased to say that I've been talking to the Woodland Trust, and I understand that they have their own scheme now called the UK ISG, which stands for the UK and Ireland Sourced and Grown Assurance Scheme. And I think this one would be a lot more appropriate for community tree nurseries. It's much more affordable. It only costs, I think, I'm not sure if it's 100 or less than 100, but not very much. And they will come and give you their own quality assurance accreditation. But it's interesting that they are asking all their clients to be registered with plant health and to be registered for plant passporting. So it comes back to being registered with ourselves again, for you to be part of this scheme. And I think it would be a benefit for you to do that. It means then you can sell your trees to the Woodland Trust should you want to, and gives you other outlets as well. Okay. This one I just threw in because the invasive non-native team are sort of specialists within the plant health team. But if any of you are interested in having a discussion with one of our inspectors who sort of specialises in this, I can certainly give you some contacts. So they spend quite a lot of their time, just looking at plants. Obviously, a lot of the more invasive plants are in waterways, clogging up waterways with increased flood risks and risks. But we're all concerned about them outcompeting our native plants, and controls can be costly and time consuming. But anyway, we have to say, I just wanted you to know that we do have a team that deal with that specifically. And that's it. Just want to give my acknowledgements to Ferroscience, who look after our samples, to DEFRA, APHA, and all of the plant health and seeds inspectors in England and Wales, who work to try and help clients, particularly in the community tree nursery. Thank you for listening. I don't know if you want to do any questions now or save them for later.
Very much, Carolyn. That was really interesting and informative. I think we'll leave questions to the end. I guess maybe the one question that did come up that might be worth addressing now is whether this applies to Scotland, and what people should do in the different jurisdictions.
Yes, I did mention that to you. So yes, the Plant Health Inspectorate is for England and Wales. In Scotland, it's run by SASA. So I'd have to provide a link because I don't exactly know. I think they have some similar schemes, but I don't exactly know. So you'd have to go directly to SASA to ask those questions. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have even have a link that you could share in the chat, that'd be a great help. Thank you very much. And someone else was asking for you had mentioned the plant health portal, a link to that as well. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that would be great.
Yeah, okay, will do if I can.
Thank you very much. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind just stop sharing your screen, and then we'll invite Jackie to speak.
Yeah.
Lovely. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Jackie. Thanks, Caroline. That was super interesting and very in-depth and slightly scary, if I'm honest with you. All the stuff about biosecurity and what's potentially going to land on our shores and destroy everything is just a bit gut-wrenching when you kind of hear it all laid out like that. But Um, I want to try and convey that we all have an important part to share in that, basically. You all are clearly interested people because you've come to this webinar today to try and learn a little bit about biosecurity and how CTNs can help. Um, and I want to kind of help you to do that. So I'm from the Tree Council. We're a national charity. I hope you've heard of us. It's in fact National Tree Week this week. This webinar is taking place as part of National Tree Week, and hopefully you've seen all kinds of wonderful tree events taking place across the country. We've been around for 50 years. We, as I say, are a national charity. We have a lot of community projects, community focused work, and we do have a science and research kind of remit as well. We do quite a bit of work with DEFRA. My sort of background is plant sciences way, way back, but since then I've had a variety of jobs. But in my work at the Tree Council, I've been working on a project about trees outside woodland. And the establishment of all kinds of trees in non-woodland settings. That's kind of our wheelhouse at the Tree Council. We do all those trees along highways, railways, trees on farms, trees all over the place that aren't just about woodland. And one of the projects that I was looking at as part of my work since joining the Tree Council was about community tree nurseries. And we knew that there were loads of people, brilliant people out there in the nation growing trees from seed and contributing enormously to their local communities. But we didn't really know how many there were. And what sorts of things they were growing and all that sort of thing. And so some of you may be aware that there was a first national survey undertaken about 3 years ago, I think, something like that, 3 or 4 years ago, which kind of gave us some baseline information about the CTN sector. And we sort of estimated there were probably about 80 in the country, and that they didn't really know all that much about biosecurity, which is fine. But that we'd like to help them do that a bit more. So then we did a few grant projects and stuff with the local authorities that we were working with as part of that project. So some of you may have even received some small grant amounts through the local authorities that were part of the Shared Outcomes Fund Trees Outside Woodlands programme. And I hope you did. So thank you very much for contributing to that research. That program's just about finishing now, just finishing off, and I've got a slightly new project, which is again biosecurity focused at CTNs, but really trying to unpick some of that. What is it about biosecurity that CTNs don't really know very well, or what are they doing really good at already? And we kind of don't know. There's been a bit of work undertaken over the last few years as part of my project and a number of other projects, but we need to just get into it a bit more. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. I shall share my screen. Hope this works. There we go. So yes, my project, it's not mine really, it's in combination with Ferroscience, the University of Coventry, who've done a lot of work in this space over the last couple of years, and the CTNC, obviously, and the Tree Health Centre at the Yorkshire Arboretum, and it's funded by DEFRA. So a lot of what we're talking about is England focused, to be fair. Clearly, community tree nurseries, obviously, I think they're excellent, but you may have seen them pop up in a recent report published by the Woodland Trust and others called Strong Roots, and this makes a number of recommendations, but basically it really highlights the importance of community tree nurseries and how they do play a crucial role in growing tree species, different tree species, and particularly those of local provenance. From some of the work under my project, we discovered that actually most of the trees grown at CTNs are collected from seed that's within 20 miles of the nursery. So chances are we're not really talking about importing things from other countries, although it's important to be aware of that sort of thing. But we do need to strengthen biosecurity. And by biosecurity, all we really mean is those actions we can take to help kind of stop the spread, really, of the potential bad things that can happen. It sounds a bit scary, but I hope we can work out a way to make it practical and useful for everybody. Yeah, as a result of my project, I say my project of, clearly it was the local authorities involved who were doing it and all those amazing people. University of Coventry and the Woodland Trust had a project as well. We've kind of pulled a lot of those resources together onto the Tree Growers Guide. .org.uk. It's a physical book, which I hope you've all seen. It's also a multi-layered online resource that has absolute loads and loads of advice and guidance on running a community tree nursery. It does have some specific sections on biosecurity to again start that journey of trying to unpick what you actually have to do. Like, it's important to absorb a lot of information, but almost there's too much information and it's a bit much to try and get your head around. So we've started along the pathway of trying to get to unpicking all of that, but clearly we need to do a little bit more. There we are. So as Carolyn was saying, the plant health management standard is the thing that underpins all of the plant health stuff, all of the biosecurity stuff. This is my slide. It's made of 9 sections. It's 33 separate items, but they all go into these 9 sections. I've split it into these 3 columns just to help me to wrap my head around which bits are bits that require bits of paper or bits that require me to actually do something or for me to do some training or for me to do some record keeping. So I think all these things on the left are kind of things that you might write down. You probably should have a plant biosecurity policy. It doesn't have to be anything difficult. I've seen Barcham's and that's just 1 page. It doesn't have to be complicated. Those things in the middle are more about the kind of doing things, and that number 4 there at the top, risk analysis and mitigation, with the acronym SOPRO, which you may have heard of, is the kind of a big ticket item on the things that you can do to understand what the potential risks are with your own operation. And then it's hygiene and control measures. And then on the right, it's things to do with monitoring and training people. So if you have a lot of new volunteers, have you got enough? Have you even got a little sign up that says if you're joining us for the first time, make sure you read this first and make sure you wash your tools, that kind of thing. And training and recording. So as I say, this is the thing that underpins all of the biosecurity. It's 9 sections, it's 33 separate items, and that's already quite a lot, in my opinion, to wrap your head around. And this is how I have tried to explain it to myself. The project that I'm working on is, imagine you're a CTN on the left-hand side there. You've got to get to the other side. You maybe want to get plant healthy certification. You maybe want to get a ready to plant assurance certificate. You may want to sell trees into a scheme that's part of the biosecure procurement exception. That's a bit of a technicality, but we'll get there. But somehow you've got to understand everything about all of that stuff in the middle there and work out which bit's the important bits and how to kind of get to it to end up being kind of having really good biosecurity practice. And clearly there are a lot of experts who can help you. Clearly it's really, really helpful to go and be registered with APHA and know your local plant health inspectors really well, because they're very, very helpful. So the bottom is where we'd like to be, something really, really practical, help and guidance to get everybody in full compliance with good biosecurity practice, basically. So yeah, this is the project. The shape of the project is kind of quite short, actually. We've been working on it since September and we're finishing in March. So I've analysed and read all the previous research that's happened already, and we're now into that middle 2 boxes there of identifying practical needs and offering a small scale grant. So practical needs is about doing a short survey to check that what I've read at the synthesis stage of analysing and reading all the stuff is actually what's happening. And then we'd like to do some short interviews with some volunteer CTNs and some workshops with some CTNs to review any gaps and identify any needs. And clearly we need to understand what is actually going to work for CTNs. I should say this project is really aimed at those quite small CTNs who just don't have budget, capacity, thousands of people, to help with this stuff. It's probably somebody really, really kind and helpful who's trying to grapple with all of this complex information and doesn't quite know what they need to know. So I should say it's for small CTNs. And basically, we're trying to come up with something that's really, really helpful, a pathway or a self-help tool or something that's really, really helpful for small CTNs. So we're in that stage now, and that's why I'm here today, because I'd like to ask you to fill out a short survey. This is what I came up with after the first bit of synthesis of the work that's happened so far. There are three. Don't worry about all the words on the screen. Don't try to read all of this text. It's just an indication of where we are on the project. There are priority A, priority B, and priority C sort of tasks. The numbers here relate to those 33 plant health management standard points that I mentioned. And the priority A ones are the ones where we should focus our attention. All of those ones in category 1, 1.1 through to 1.7 are those kind of regulatory ones, bits of papery ones. Are you actually doing the right? Are you registered with the right people? All that kind of stuff. Some of it might not be relevant. Again, if you're not importing necessarily, you might not need to do stuff. If you're not doing other things, you might not need to do other things. The SOPRA one, the 4.1, is quite an important one. I'll come on to that in a second. But then the stuff on the right is actually what we think that CTNs are doing pretty well at. I mean, most people know to look after their compost properly, keep water use clean, and do good waste management, and actually do quite good notification of visitors and that sort of thing. So we're going to spend less attention on those elements, but it's great to know that people are doing those kinds of things already. Yes, so as I say, section 4 has so far been coming out as being the most important and challenging for small CTNs. As I say, who just don't have necessarily the time to be doing all this reading and getting to grips with understanding thousands of pests and diseases. And I mean, I'm fairly new to the area myself, and I think there's quite a bit of jargon and words to get your head around. One of them is this SOPRA, which all it means is Site and Operations Pest Risk Analysis, which is basically do a bit of analysis about what your site is like, do a bit of analysis about what your operations are like, and figure out what's risky and think about ways to mitigate the things that might be risky. That's all it is. But it itself has 9 steps to it. Some are to do with knowing what trees you are growing and what possible pests and diseases they might be vulnerable to. And some are to do with movement in, around, and out of the nursery. So there's pathways. So this picture here is again on the Tree Growers Guide website. A very small CTN did this for their own operations and their risk pathways. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of potential inputs along the top there for potential places for pests and diseases to enter. And then in the middle there are kind of movement within the nursery, a lot of areas where that can happen. And then at the bottom there, outputs from the site are things you need to consider and potential, things that could leave your site. So you basically want to be being quite contained. There are already quite a lot of templates for this kind of thing, and there really is a lot of advice available, but it's quite difficult to navigate. And as I say, it's tricky. So we hope we can figure out a way to make it more useful for you all, and usable. So as I mentioned, I'd really, really appreciate it if you could scan this QR code. I'll put a link in the chat as well when I've stopped sharing my screen, and complete a really, really short survey. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer, and it literally took me, I think, I'll say 6 minutes to be generous, but it's not got any long-winded written answers. It's just clicky things you can say, and it's not a test. I just need to know, what you don't know, what's helpful, and that kind of thing. So I'd really, really appreciate it if you could take part in that survey. That would be great. Thank you. Also, some of you, I'm kind of assuming that I'm speaking to quite a mixed audience here, probably some people who have just logged on for the first time to really understand what biosecurity even is, and also some people who probably know quite well what biosecurity is and have done various registrations and have probably, perhaps even taken part in some group schemes for plant healthy certification or such like. So, if anybody is in the latter category and does have some documents that you'd be willing to share with me to help inform my understanding of what you can do for biosecurity, things like a biosecurity policy or maybe a SOPRA analysis, what's coming in, what's going in any format. I'd be really, really grateful if you wouldn't mind sharing that. There's my email address on the screen. There is also a space at the end of the survey for you to indicate whether or not you'd be willing to take part in some really short interviews, which would be via Zoom or Teams, similar to this really, but a one-to-one kind of interview as part of our research. I really appreciate those. Anybody who'd be willing to take part, please write your email address at the end of the survey, or in fact email me if you'd be willing to take part. That would be great. And similarly, if you'd also like to take part in a future workshop where we'll be giving a bit more help and advice and testing out some of the things that we think we've come up with as practical bits of advice for CTNs, please leave your contact details as well. And as I say, I'll put a link in the chat to this. And then just finally, because it's National Tree Week and because this is a new project, I thought I'd mention that we are just, as the Tree Council, starting a new project called Growing Together, which is with M&G PLC, one of our partners, and we are aiming to grow communities and grow trees, aiming to double the number of CTNs actually. So that's just new, and we're all enthusiastic about it. So I thought I'd take this sneaky opportunity to mention it to you all, in case you were not aware. There will be some grant funding available through that program, as well as through my piece of research. Fairly modest, but based on the findings of what small CTNs might actually need in terms of biosecurity. So please do, if you can tell us what you need, then we can hopefully try and get something useful to you. That's it. I will just stop sharing now and make sure I put all those links that I promised to put in the chat. Do let me know if you need to see the QR code again to scan the survey form. I shall do that now.
Thank you very much, Jackie. That was really, really interesting, and yeah, hopefully as many people as possible on this call and elsewhere can get involved to help with the research. As you very well illustrated, there's a lot to try and get through for CTN, and the more people that complete the survey and help with the interviews and provide documents and things, then hopefully the end result will be a much more simplified process. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I will also share the survey on our weekly email update tomorrow. So hopefully that will help. If your CTN isn't a member of CTNC, this is my chance to plug getting involved. It's free of charge. I'll stick the link into the chat as well, and I just send around a brief email update every week about what's happening in the world of CTNC. So we'll include the survey. But yes, folks, do please, as many people as possible, complete the survey and help Jackie out. It's really for everyone's benefit, especially if there's possible grant funding available as well. Okay, there's been a couple of questions. So if anyone else has any questions for Carolyn or Jackie based on their presentations or anything else to do with biosecurity, do please drop them into the chat. Carolyn, there's a couple of questions to do with disinfectant. There was a question about how does cling kill compared to, I think it was Clearicide was the one you had mentioned. Um, and the other question was, what's the best practice to dispose of boot wash from the liquid from a boot washing tank?
Yeah, but I thought that was quite a good question, actually. Generally, I would say put it down the main drain, I think, because that's going to get treated by going through the main sewage system. I think, yeah, I think that's what I would recommend, and that's what we tend to do. Sometimes we tip boot washings into hedgerows, but I think if you felt there was a risk of phytophthora or something being in your boot washing, I wouldn't do that, to be perfectly honest. I'm not that familiar with propeller, but I have heard of it before. But what you're sort of looking for is something like 70% alcohol, because that pretty much takes out all bacteria. It would kill a pest as well if there happened to be one attached. It won't take out all viruses, but it will take out the vast majority. Viruses are extremely difficult to kill. And the one that gets recommended is a chemical called Virkon, but I don't like that because it can also kill fish in watercourses, and it's a bit too toxic for generally using on a nursery, I would say. So 70% alcohol takes out most. If you got a problem with virus on your site, which you felt was difficult to eradicate, then we'd probably come and talk to you individually and work out a best way of dealing with it. Does that answer those two?
Yeah, thank you. There was a follow-up question, a related question. Is there a specific type of Clearicide that APHA use? There seems to be a few different types.
Is there a few? Oh dear, hang on. We'll look. I'll go without our bottle of Clearicide. Well, we've got 70-30 IPA on ours, if that helps. Does that help?
Thank you. That should be useful for people to know. Another question is some people have said that water and scrubbing all the dirt off of say the likes of tools and stuff is sufficient. Would that be sufficient for a cleaning kit?
I think if you didn't think there was any problem on your site, yes, it would be. Just keeping them clean is sufficient. I think it's as soon as there with pests and diseases, it's all where are you at? Have you got a problem? If you haven't got a problem, then you're pretty clean all the time, and your hygiene standards are probably good. But as soon as you think there's something on site, you probably need to increase and improve your hygiene methods. That's what I would say. So I think generally speaking, soap and water can do a pretty good job. But if you think you're going to have got issues, then you need to become, you need to up it more.
Can I ask you, Caroline, actually, sorry to chip in there. How much is it about sort of just understanding what the riskiest behavior is, kind of thing? So I'm expecting some CTN volunteers to be going out into their local woods to do some seed collection. It's just the local woods. They might not know what's in there. Then they're in their wellies and they come back to site to grow something. Would that be a good point to do your boot wash, or would it be on leaving the woodland, or is there a better place to do it than other places?
Yeah, we usually clean our boots as we leave the site that we visited, so that we don't carry anything back. So if this is something on it, and if you do need to put the water washing down, it's going into a site where that whatever
it's already there. Yeah.
There. Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Just to follow up, Carolyn, we mentioned the difference for Scotland, and you said earlier that that it didn't apply to, or the passporting didn't apply to Northern Ireland due to the difficulties with the EU.
That's what they have they have their own system. They have a slightly different label. That's all. So to highlight it's Northern Ireland.
Okay. So again, for Northern Ireland, where would people look, or who should they contact
So they are part of the plant health inspectorate, the same as myself. So you'd have to just get your local plant health inspector in Northern Ireland. But obviously, because Southern Ireland is part of the EU, I don't have experience at how that works going across the border. So I think it's probably best to contact your local one. Yeah.
Folks, if anyone else has any questions, do please pop them into the chat. We have some time left. If there's any urgent questions. Hopefully people are busy filling in the survey for Jackie. If not, we can draw to a close and let people get away early. Just give a quick plug. Our next event will likely be our open space session in December. For those of you who haven't been involved before, it's just an open Zoom call for an hour in the evening for people to come along and ask any questions about tree growing, community tree nurseries in general. And we usually tend to have a couple of experienced people on the call as well to help out. And yeah, then we will be having a webinar sometime in the new year. That's yet to be confirmed on fruit trees and growing fruit trees for community tree nurseries. So do keep an eye out for that as well. And hopefully an in-person event in the new year as well, TBC. Oh, it looks like we may have a couple of questions here. Let's see. Okay, Fiona was saying, thanks very much for the presentations. We've just started our CTN in late summer. We've had some donations by local people who have grown trees at home. And we've put them into a quarantine area. How long should we leave them in there for? And is it best to avoid this going forward?
Good question, but I think it's fairly normal for plants to be moved from site to site. So having a quarantine area, we recommend it. You'll find it on all the National Trust sites. They'll have a little quarantine area just off on one site. So I wouldn't say don't do it. I would just say be careful. And it depends again on the plant. I think if it's deciduous and you're not going to see the leaves for some time, I would leave it there at least until it's in leaf. And you can get a good idea of the general plant health of that tree. I mean, if it's evergreen, then obviously you might get an idea a bit quicker. So I don't have a specific time, but I would say at least 4 months and anything up to a year, something like that, depending on the plant you brought in. And if you've got any suspicions, then either give us a shout, or if it starts to die back and you're not happy, I would just burn it fairly quickly, to be honest. And I think hard standing is quite useful for a quarantine area so that you can disinfect it afterwards. So if it's, hopefully you're bringing things in pots, put them on some sort of hard standing. And then, if there is a problem, you can disinfect that area afterwards. It's with fungus, it's the spores. They'll just drop to the ground. And then it's with the rain, the rainfall and the splash will come back up, bring the spores and infect the lower leaves of the next batch of plants. So you always have to be thinking how the pests and diseases are sort of spreading. Bacteria also spread a lot by raindrops as well. We often tell people not to do overhead watering because it can splash from plant to plants. Obviously that involves more sort of systems involved with lower watering, shall we say, through little tubes and that, but that can be a lot safer. It stops all that sort of spreading by splashing. Virus is often mechanical spread, so just touching a plant and then touching another plant, you can spread the virus. that's really difficult. And I know it sounds a little bit, like a catastrophe when I'm talking about these things, but actually quarantine pests and diseases are quite rare. So don't panic too much, but it's just to make you aware and make you think about what you're doing and keep your risks to a minimum. And I was quite impressed with Jackie's biosecurity sheets. There's like huge amounts of information on it. But just keep it simple. Keep your batches separate. Don't go for monoculture. Think about cleaning. And have quarantine areas. And if you are worried, then please contact us as soon as possible. That's the basic bottom line. But yeah, I'm fully supportive of community tree nurseries. I think so much better than importing. Yeah, definitely.
So can I ask again, Carolyn, sorry to interrupt, but can you just walk me through the possible introduction pathway? If somebody brought a plant to my doorstep and I'm a CTN, maybe I'm just a really tiny one and I grow them in my back garden. And my neighbour from 3 streets over has got a pot with soil in it and a little sapling. It's this tall, and they're like, I know you, you grow trees. Do you want to have this and grow it on for me? And I want to say yes. What are the how might it have like there's soil involved, there's an actual tree involved, we don't know.
There's quite a lot. Well, first of all, I'd have a look at what was being brought. I mean, if it looked of good health, I'd probably say thank you very much. And I think if it was already not looking too good, I'd say thanks, but no thanks. So yes, again, it's so individual, and there are so many different pathways. But the soil can harbour. But if it's a fungus, and most of the quarantine ones are going in through the top, through above the soil level. So you could repot straight away and dispose of what has been brought round if you thought there was a risk, and put it in clean growing media, whatever people are using. And then I would just put it on one side just to see. It's fairly easy to see when a plant is starting to be taken out by a pest and disease. It's not that difficult to spot. Don't overthink it, really. That's what I would say. But rain splash and wind are the 2 main forms of dispersal, definitely. And we all have to deal with that, particularly in Wales.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And just to reiterate, it's great to know that that you guys are there and it's available at the end of a phone as well. If people do have any queries or worries about this. The couple more questions connected to quarantining. Is there anywhere in a nursery that would be best for a quarantine? Would that be near the entrance or to the rear? And what is the best practice around quarantining, for example, seedlings from another nursery?
Yeah, I think near the entrance is actually quite a good idea. So you've not brought them in and taken them past all your other plants or trees that you've got on site. And it just depends on the quantities that you're dealing with. Again, it can be a really small area, or as I say, most of the National Trust ones I've seen, they're probably just about 3 meters by 3 meters, and they're not huge, but they'll just put them in there, keep an eye on them on hard standing, and leave them there, however many, 4 months for a year. But obviously you might need to do some potting up. It doesn't mean if they are small, they might need some attention to pot up, and you can still do that. It doesn't mean that you can't keep improving the sort of resilience of that plant, because what we do find at the moment with some of our wider environment surveys is that the plants are struggling with these long periods of drought and then long periods of waterlogging. And it just takes their resilience down. And as soon as their resilience is low, they'll become susceptible not just to quarantine pests and diseases, but there are a lot of opportunistic pests and diseases out there. So one that we've seen a lot in the last few years are like phoma, which is a fungal disease, and pestiolopsis, which is a fungus disease. Well, these aren't quarantined. They're just getting into the trees because the trees are struggling to live on a seasonal basis, because one minute they're too hot and they're not getting enough water, and the next minute they're waterlogged and they can't breathe. So it's a really complex situation out there, and we try and help people with things like that, and we can diagnose when they've got these opportunistic diseases. But as I say, the other side of our job is to look out for the big ones, and mostly, they'll be coming over on imports. So, hopefully that won't affect nurseries, which are collecting their own seed. But yeah, you never know what's around the corner.
Be prepared. Expect the unexpected, as they say. Okay, quite a few questions coming in, but we'll maybe try and get through a couple more. So we said we currently have a disinfection area upon entry into the nursery, which involves a contained boot brush, followed by a clean kill spray, and no water is involved. Would that be sufficient?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Excellent. Karen has said, we've just started to collect seed from the castle grounds in Stornoway. We have permission. I noticed alder seeds have something that identifies as alder tongue. Is this a problem?
Oh, I don't know that one. Sorry. I'll go and have a look.
Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, you had mentioned actually the person cutting down the ash tree and using it with wood chip. So Leon was asking, yeah, the tree surgeons will offer wood chip for mulching and stuff. Can it be matured for a number of months quarantine before use?
Personally, I wouldn't go down that route. I would only use healthy trees for chipping on nursery sites. I think the risk is too high that you might bring something in.
Let's see. Fiona was asking, we'd like to set up a community garden next to our new CTN. Do we have to keep these areas completely separate with fencing and a separate boot wash system?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have seen gardens and community tree nurseries side by side.
Would it depend on what sort of CTN operation it was? If it was a lot of, if literally all the things you're growing just literally go next door, does that seems a bit overkill, or is that, am I just misunderstanding, or is it?
No, I mean, and your risks are all quite low with that. So I wouldn't discourage those two things being side by side, to be honest. I think it's just this awareness. If you felt something was going wrong, that you might have to change your strategy. But I wouldn't say don't do it.
Yes, I guess it's a question of, I mean, I obviously about Carolyn's knowledge about all of this, but I imagine if my local community garden had a national tree of great importance that was a potential threat of something, and I had a CTN right next door that I was growing that species, I'd be super, super careful, and I probably would keep them quite strictly apart. But if it's a new thing that I'm,
yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on the situation, and and if the gardens, it's difficult not to have a host plant or something. But if you've got a good variety everywhere, as I say, diversity is a great thing. You don't have a huge number of the same thing in one place, because it keeps the pool of any pest or disease very low. And you'll find that if it encourages in all sorts of insect life, then they sort of self-regulate quite a lot of the time with some of the pests and diseases. So yeah, good diversity is definitely a good thing.
That's good, thank you. Another question, are we able to send samples to the lab ourselves? Or do we
No,
have to go through?
no,
Okay.
yeah, it always has to go through us, because Plant Health are contracted with the labs, and we have a set way that we do it, the system to sort of inform the lab what's coming in. So yeah, you'd have to get in touch with the Plant Health for them to take the sample.
And Ellie was asking if anyone has a blueprint for a biosecurity protocol for their nursery site that they'd be willing to share. So if anyone does, do please get in touch with Ellie in the comments there. I think Zoe might be able to help out. Okay, folks. Unless there's any other questions. We are drawing near the end of this evening, so I once again just really like to thank Carolyn and Jackie for their time, for two fantastic presentations, so much information to share, and for answering everyone's questions. Once again, do please complete the survey. I will send the link around again tomorrow in the weekly update email. And yes, thanks very much to everyone. It's great to see so many people. This is obviously a topic that a lot of people are interested in. So thank you for giving up some time on your Tuesday evening. I think that's it for now. This has been recorded, so once our tech person is able to format it together, we'll get it up on YouTube, and you'll be able to read it over again. And maybe ask Carolyn and Jackie if it's okay to share the presentation, the slides, and we look forward to seeing the outcome of the biosecurity project as well. So yes, Jackie, there's someone asking how do we contact you for the study questions. Maybe just if you want to pop your email address in
Yeah,
the
I'll do
chat.
that now.
And yeah, other than that, folks, I just want to say thank you very much, and do keep an eye out for the next in our webinar series, or join us for the next open space session. And thank you very much.